Good morning. I'm Bruce Ramirez, Executive Director at the Council, and I'd like to welcome you to our headquarters office and this morning's briefing. This year CEC is celebrating our 90th anniversary, and over that period of time the Council has been very focused on advancing public policy for the education of children with exceptionalities, and also creating the tools and professional development opportunities for our members, so that our members are providing the evidence-based practices that our children and youth need in their education. This has been an issue for us that has been very important in terms of our membership. Our membership is about 50% practitioners, teachers. We have a good proportion of the membership that's administrators and higher ed faculty. So as you can imagine, special education teacher evaluation is an important consideration for the membership. And while our position paper basically focuses on teachers, we all know that performance evaluation is going to be extending to our school-based administrators as well as we move forward. Our position received a great deal of vetting within the Council, as well as the involvement and work of other experts in the field. We had over 600 of our members comment on the position statement in a draft form that was then used to basically further refine the position. Last night and afternoon, we conducted 2 webinars on the performance evaluation position, and we had over 500 folks participate in those webinars with regard to the interest. It's a very high interest area for us, and we're very pleased that you've been able to join us this morning so that we can have a dialogue on the position and further discuss its implications and its power with regard to our work. As we all know, this area is an area of high priority across the nation in our schools, and will continue to be so. And we look forward to working with all of you with regard to your associations, the education community, as we all move forward in this area.
Thank you, Bruce. Good morning. Welcome to CEC. We're pleased to have you with us this morning. We appreciate your partnership with the Council for Exceptional Children, and we look forward to working with you as we begin to implement some of the components of this teacher evaluation position. So I'm going to share with you just a few of the logistics this morning. You have an agenda in front of you. We have some featured guest speakers. Lindsay and I will initially give you an overview of the position. Maggie McLaughlin, who is our CEC president, and I'll introduce our panel in a few minutes, will give some overarching remarks about the vision of this position and where we hope it will go with our membership and how it will unfold in an implementation process. And then our panel will speak about their experiences in the field, both from an administrative point of view and a teacher point of view, a special education teacher point of view. In your packet of materials, you actually have the position, which is the colorful document. There's a background information in the document that gives you information about the research and some of the issues that we're finding in special education teacher evaluation, as well as some examples of practice across the nation. Now, these examples of practice are not necessarily ones that we're supporting or endorsing. They're just information to give you a sense of what's happening across the nation. And then finally, the actual position itself begins on page 9. Now, if you're interested in a smaller version or just the position itself, up on our web we have a 4-page document that you can feel free to download if you just want to have a 2-page document to use. Let me tell you a little bit about our featured guest today. To my immediate right is Dr. Maggie McLaughlin. Maggie serves as the current CEC president, Council for Exceptional Children. We've had the great fortune of her leadership this past year, and she is winding her year down, and she will be finishing at the end of December, but that's not over for Maggie, because she will continue as past president. But
too happy.
we were very fortunate to have Maggie in the position that she was in during this time because she has a great interest in special education teacher evaluation. Many of you know Maggie has done a lot of research and work on school reform issues, and this is one of the top school reform issues that we're addressing. Maggie is the Associate Dean for Research and Graduate Education in the College of Education and the Professor, Department of Special Education at the University of Maryland, College Park, when she's not being our CEC president. So the other good thing for us is Maggie was just around the corner, so it was really nice. We were able to engage a lot with her throughout the year. To her right is Jane Quenneville. Jane is the Director of Special Education in the Alexandria City Public Schools. She has 28 years of experience in the area of special education, so she's been around the block. She's held lots of positions in special education. She was an occupational therapist, an assistive technology specialist, and a special ed coordinator. To her right is Donna Sacco, and Donna is a nationally board certified special education teacher. She's at Drew Model School in Arlington, Virginia, and she is currently teaching in a self-contained classroom with students with disabilities, young children K through 3. So beginning with those early intervention programs, which we know are so important. She's also the president of the Council for Exceptional Children unit in the District of Columbia, so providing leadership to that unit and the members in DC, and she is also on our board of directors at CEC. So again, we've been very fortunate to have Donna's expertise and her point of view on a number of issues throughout the year as a special education teacher. Let's talk about how did we get here and why. Well, I don't need to tell probably anybody in this room how we got here because you are all dealing with the same issues that we are. So we have the political context. We know that there has been a great focus on school reform from this administration, from the Department of Education, from the White House, and part of the school reform efforts have emphasized looking at reforming teacher evaluation. We know that many teachers feel like their evaluations are not conducted in ways that are most efficient or effective, and that don't provide them any good feedback for helping them develop their knowledge and skills for the future. So teachers are really looking forward to having really quality teacher evaluation, and I don't think you would talk to many teachers who would say, do we want a good teacher evaluation? Of course they do. They want to grow, they want to learn new techniques, and they want to be part of their community and their school and in their district and provide the leadership and the services that are so important for young children and youth and their families. So what we hear over and over, though, from special education teachers, they want to have a great evaluation, but they want it to be fair and they want it to be effective and meaningful. And so I think that's where we are with some of the school reform efforts. We know that there are varying stages of implementation across the nation through Race to the Top, through the waivers of the Elementary and Secondary Education Act. Teacher evaluation and administrator evaluation are a big part of the reform efforts. So CEC began its work in 2009 on this issue, and we've been working on it diligently over the time to get the opinions of our members. And through board approval and through board leadership and the leadership of our president, Maggie, we moved forward with creating a position on teacher evaluation. Now, this is our timeline. I'm not going to go through all the details, but anything that we do with regard to a position or policy is grounded in our members' input, and we take that very seriously. So we have a variety of opportunities for members along the way in creating a policy or a position to provide feedback. So we did it in a number of ways. Many of you do the same things in your own associations and organizations through town hall forums at our convention, through online forums, through our board. We have a representative assembly, which is part of our governance structure, which are 2 representatives from all of our state units and our 17 specialty division units. So we had more input than we ever thought we'd get on a particular topic, and when we put it up online, within days, you know, the email box was growing and growing and growing. We kept hearing the bing, bing, bing with the email box. And by the time we finished which was only a month, we had over 600 responses. So Lindsay, Kim, and I carried around those responses all summer, reading them, rereading them, grouping them, trying to get a sense of what our teachers really wanted to see in a teacher evaluation. And then finally, our board of directors approved the position in October of this year. And now we're in the process of sharing that position with the field, with our members, with you all as associations. Some of you served as experts on our panel in helping us review this. We wanted to make sure that it was also grounded beyond our members and our teachers to be collaborative and to coincide with other initiatives that are happening out there. We know that ASHA has a very extensive statement on speech and language pathologists, so we wanted to make sure that we're in line with that. The elementary principals also, secondary and elementary principals also released a document on administrator evaluation. So we want to make sure that we're collaborating with the experts out there, with the associations, so that we come to the table with a united voice on this particular issue, and that's so important.
As Deb said, I am finishing my term as the 2012 CEC president. I've had the honor of serving as president of this organization this past year, working very closely with Deb, Lindsay, Kim, I don't see where she is, but she's back there. The policy and advocacy team on developing this position and thinking through how the process, not just the process for approval, but the input, which Lindsay is going to talk to you about, and really reaching out to those key, not just our stakeholders, our constituents in the organization, but our key experts who know and understand what it is to be a teacher of a child with exceptionalities. So I'm going to make my remarks kind of simple here because obviously Lindsay's going to give you the details, but you know, from my perspective and from everyone in this room, we know teachers matter. We've got decades of research that tell us that teachers can make the biggest difference, particularly for children who struggle, whether they're struggling due to a disability or some exceptionality, due to poverty, due to some other circumstances. A good teacher matters. And we've spent years and millions of dollars trying to determine what makes a good teacher, how do we prepare a good teacher, how do we know if we have a good teacher. So as Deb has pointed out, this is not a new issue, but it certainly has ramped up in this last maybe 5, 6, 7 years, certainly during the first Obama administration with Secretary Duncan. And clearly, if you've seen his statements, which I'm sure everyone in this room has because you're inside the Beltway, or I guess we're out. No, we're inside here. I never know. But you've seen the Secretary's statements that teacher quality, teacher effectiveness are going to be a major impetus for his going forward with this administration. So within that context, CEC has always been about teachers and quality teachers. Bruce referenced the fact that the organization is in its 90th year, and it was founded by people who were learning to be teachers, who were at Columbia Teachers College, who were studying to be teachers of children with disabilities. The organization grew across the country because these teachers knew they needed a voice, they needed a way to meet together and to support one another professionally and to grow together, because this job was in many ways different. And so CEC has been about its teachers, and this is just an extension of that. What is really important, I think, to understand is that CEC, as well as other people who advocate on behalf of teachers and the preparation of teachers, and their successful practice of their profession, is that we understand that good teacher evaluations and accountability are important pieces of that. But it is so important that we must get this right. Now, I'm an associate dean in a college of education, and we are using the TPAP, the performance assessments, as part of our teacher preparation program. And I'm truly not a long-time teacher educator. I'm kind of, as Deb said, I've looked at the broad policies, but I have come to see how using these as part of our teacher preparation and working with our local school districts as to align the way in which they evaluate teachers with how we are preparing them in their clinical settings is really so important for our young candidates, our teacher candidates, because they know what is expected of them, and we know what we need to be focusing on from our professional end, our preparation end. But again, we need to get this right. So what about teachers of children with disabilities? And this is where we began as a profession, and certainly with the leadership here within CEC, to say, you know, we agree it's important. We don't want to exclude these teachers any more than we want to exclude the children from these important reforms. But we need to understand what we're talking about when we talk about a teacher who deals with children with exceptionalities. We have one here who will attest to what I'm going to say. We tend to think about a teacher of students with learning disabilities or autism spectrum or behavior disorders as this, she does these 5 things. Well, within any of these categories, and I'm probably preaching to the choir here because many of you know, there is enormous, enormous variation and needs, learning needs within those students. And so any given special ed teacher who is effectively practicing her profession or his craft needs to take a variety of roles, needs to do a variety of things in any given day. Direct service, individual tutoring, supports accommodations, designing through universal design, the curriculum, consultation. These are roles that vary, and they vary from what, quote, many, not all, maybe the general grade level teacher does. And so the first issue that we brought to this team over here was, how do we deal with a performance evaluation that can accommodate the breadth and variety of experiences and expectations that we have for teachers of these students? And Lindsay will talk about that. A second big issue that probably we all share is, how do we use student performance or achievement data as part of a teacher evaluation, particularly when we look at some of the issues that we continue to face with getting valid assessment data for many students with disabilities. Hopefully the PARC and the CBAC, I think I'm pronouncing that correctly, will address some of that, but I'm not so sure that we're there yet. So we have issues with value-added and concerns about where we are with the use of student data. Not that we want to exclude student data, but there are challenges there. And the other challenge, of course, is that we have special education teachers who are distributed, allocated, I guess would be the term that the administrators would use, somewhat differently across schools. They're not staffed the same way that other teachers are. So when you're aggregating those numbers up for an administrator's evaluation or for a school-wide evaluation, you've got differences because you have different numbers and types of these teachers. Those are just some of the most obvious issues. And so when we started with those issues, we said, look, we need to delve into this. We're not rejecting teacher evaluations. We're not rejecting and saying that we should not be part of this, but as I said before, we need to get this right. So I'm very pleased with not just the work that you all have done, but the response that we have from the teachers and those people who practice in our field. And I'm sure you're going to be excited when you hear what Lindsay has to say about the actual position.
Thank you so much, Maggie. It's been a really amazing experience being able to work with you through this year, and I want to personally thank you for pushing our organization to work on this issue, which I know everybody in this room probably knows even a lot better than I do. So let's get right at it. As you can see on the left side of this screen are some of the components. What I want to do is highlight for you the areas we picked out and talk about a couple things in there that we think are most important. So the first area that rose to prominence, you've heard it through all of the remarks, is that we believe that there are some fundamental system components that need to be in any system. The first and most important is that there should be in schools one system. We see too much fragmentation. We hear constantly from our members that special education, general education can operate in silos, that people in some cases don't want to own every kid, are concerned about who's responsible for what. One system has to be in place for everyone to ensure everyone shares common goals, common language, common responsibility. Additionally, the 3 bullet points that are under that really all talk about one thing. This system, in our view, needs to be real and meaningful. What does that mean? It has to provide constructive feedback that means something. It has to do that on a regular basis. There has to be regular interaction. It needs to be maybe more structured like a coaching relationship. It can't be, I come to your classroom once for 5 minutes in December and once for 5 minutes in June or May. It needs to be something where it's an ongoing dialogue. We realize a pressure on the system. It's going to be time, it's resources. But if we're talking about making a real difference for the achievement of students with disabilities, constant feedback and a good dialogue and relationship has to be something that we aspire to. Next. This is something Maggie just spoke very eloquently about it, and we heard it from a lot of our experts. Maggie mentioned that and so did Deb, discussed our process for sending this policy out to experts. The first, of course, for us at CEC, our experts are our teachers. What are you seeing and hearing in the classroom? And the first thing they said was, people don't really understand my role. They don't understand what I'm doing day to day. As a former attorney, I wanted this to be really strong. We talk about identify the complex role of a special education teacher. To me, I feel like your job evaluation has to be based on a mutual understanding so that you go into it and know, what am I expected to do? And the person who is evaluating you has a similar expectation. That's across the board for any of us. But we see that as a real complicating factor for anybody working in OT, PT, any of the specialized instructional personnel areas, any of our special educators. They're working in really different ways. They're also working with, as Maggie pointed out also, very different and complicated learners, learners who demonstrate complicated learning patterns for different types of areas. If you don't understand who that person is working with and what they're doing, it's hard to provide them constructive and meaningful feedback. So a base understanding between the evaluator and the teacher has to be, what's the complex role, what's the scope of that role? Measure the use of evidence-based practices. This is by far the most controversial part of teacher evaluation, right? How do we include, it gets at what is one of the most controversial parts. How do we include student growth? Teacher contribution to student growth measures. It's been so difficult, and in many ways the policy led before the science is there. And we're trying to kind of work that out. From our perspective, we're very concerned, as Maggie pointed out, about the use of statistical models, algorithmic models, value-added models. We don't have the research that tells us that they are valid in team teaching situations. But also, to echo Maggie's comment, we do not reject the proposal that student achievement shouldn't be linked or shouldn't be used in any way to measure the performance of a teacher. We just need to be careful about how we're doing that. I'm going to speak in a minute about what we need for research. We need funded research about how we can use these for special education teachers and also for our related service providers. Just to talk again a minute about what Deb and Maggie also spoke about, these experts that we sent it to. We sent this position, draft copies of it, to many of you in the room, in your associations. We sent it to assessment experts, other policy perspective experts, should I say. Everyone saying, please give us some information about this. Give us your feedback. We had some amazing comments come in from several of the researchers working at ETS. And from lots of the researchers working in our centers that deal with special education alternative assessment. And we feel pretty confident that we shouldn't use or base any teacher's evaluation on one measure. It has to be multiple measures. We don't have a lot of good research to tell us what some of those measures are. But in our position, we do talk about student surveys, parent surveys, other types of district and local assessments. And then pushing for the research to get us to a place where we can have some better information about what we can use to measure. So multiple measures and making sure that those are meaningful. But a part of the multiple measures is ensuring there aren't unintended consequences. And what do we mean by that? One of our concerns is that we will create evaluation systems that'll be 50% based on student achievement, 50% based on a principal's observation or another's observation. Well, if the principal isn't well trained and basically provides the same score to all of the teachers, then the entire evaluation becomes, the only differentiation you'll see will be in student achievement. If we don't have solid, good measures providing valuable information that's valid, that will greatly skew that evaluation. That's a concern. So ours, we don't reject that link, but we definitely say proceed with caution. I want to speak just briefly directly to the IEP, because almost everyone, I've had conversations with everyone in this room pretty much about, shouldn't we just use the IEP, or we should never use the IEP? The way that we want to focus on the IEP is to say, for the development of the IEP, for the implementation of the IEP. So development, that includes case management of that IEP, right? That is the purview of a special education teacher. Implementation, is it being implemented with fidelity? Do the right people have it? Are the evidence-based practices being used? Is it being monitored? Those are appropriate parts of a teacher's practice and use with the IEP that should be included in an evaluation. But we reject the notion that student growth as measured on an IEP should be included. Why do we do that? One of the main reasons why we do that is because it is, by its nature, a child-centered document. It is about an individual child and that individual child's needs. It is not a standardized measure across several different children. It is also a while the single most useful document, the cornerstone, it's open to subjective interpretation. And we've seen throughout our nation this year cheating scandals at their highest amount. We don't want to create a system that may incentivize someone to lower expectations for students with disabilities because they're concerned about how the system and the structure of the system is going to impact their review or their pay. That's not what our teachers want. Our teachers are in the room to have those magic moments where they see children achieve and make progress over time. We don't want to corrupt the IEP by taking a measure that is a child-centered measure, is meant to be individualized, and potentially opening it to some other pressures that wouldn't forward any of our goals. Next, I hope that from what we've said, everything reflects this goal, recognizing the professionalism of special educators. Really what that means is everything I've just said, giving them constructive feedback that's tailored to what they are doing, that helps them, that's ongoing, that gives them a sense of, I'm practicing at this and I'm growing and getting better. And that is really a holistic way of looking at that. And we feel that if you set a system based on respect, where teachers are involved, it's open and transparent, they understand, they buy in, we will have well-grounded personnel decisions. We also have a portion in there that talks about we've got to have good resources, we've got to have reasonable caseloads, we've got to have those other structures and supports and positive working conditions in a school to ensure that our teachers can practice to the best of their ability. Finally, I think I just mentioned, I know everyone has said, as we all see, the policy is ahead of the research in many of these ways. And so how do we manage that when the systems have to be in place by a certain deadline? We hope policymakers are speaking at the state, district, and local level. And they're creating systems that can be flexible enough to allow for change over time. That's a difficult thing, but we certainly hope that that's the goal, that that open line of communication is achieved. That's what we're pushing for. We also, as I said earlier, are asking everybody and their brother, please fund research on this. Please fund some research about how we can get some good measures. And finally, as I've stated kind of throughout, one of our big concerns is intended consequences of the system and unintended. And how do we think of unintended? You have to really sit and carefully think through all of the options, all of the possibilities that may happen. So we are really hoping that when people are putting these systems into place, that is one of the things they're doing, is taking some time to consider, where may this take us, and is that a place we want to go? So that is our position in a nutshell. I'd be more than happy to speak with everybody here has my email. I'd be more than happy to speak with you about any questions you have about it or any ways it can play out. I'm so excited now to pass this over to the administrator perspective, the teacher perspective, to give you a little bit of a sense of where we are with that.
Just a little bit more about me. I've spent 21 years in Virginia Beach in a variety of positions, as Deb said, and have been the director of special education at Alexandria City Public Schools for just the past 2 years. So going into my 5th year there. Manage approximately 50 people in my department who support schools. Our major focus areas are inclusive practices, autism services, assistive technology, and career and transition. And everything we do centers around instruction and the impact on student achievement. I'd like to talk a little bit about how we built our teacher evaluation system. We started in December of 2011, really conducting a crosswalk between our current system and the system that was proposed by the Virginia Department of Education. I think we were fortunate in many respects because Dr. James Strong from the College of William & Mary was instrumental in both systems, and so we found quick connections very easily. We had about 26 members on our committee, and we started the work actually in January of 2012, really looking at the domain areas of professional knowledge, instructional planning, and delivery of assessment, learning environment, professionalism, and student academic progress. We purposefully removed the word evaluation from our system, and we call it a teacher growth and assessment system, and I think that speaks to how we want to approach it. Because I think we know that the word evaluation always brings up a lot of anxiety, and people might say, oh, you can slice it and dice it any way you want, you're still assessing me, but really trying to focus in on the growth piece. We aligned our teacher growth and assessment system with our ACPS learning model, which is curriculum, relationships, and instruction. We used feedback loops from teachers, so we had the 26 members, we had some outside reviewers, but we also had feedback loops for teachers through focus groups and an online briefing room. We also integrated student voice into our assessment system, and teachers are required to do a student survey. It's not an option. Kindergarten to 12th grade, they've got to integrate that into their system, and it will only be viewed by the teachers. It does not go to the administrators. I think we also made a very conscientious decision to limit the percentage assigned to student academic growth. The State Department, the Virginia Department of Education, was really emphasizing 40%, and because we were in year 1 of implementation right now, we as a division went with 20% this year. Unfortunately, I think we are going to be forced to go to 40% because the state is going to mandate that. We kind of squeaked around it this year. And I think it's important, like Lindsay said, but I don't know that we really feel that it has to be so heavily weighted at 40%. But again, you know how everything kind of trickles down. We have 2 methods of addressing performance issues with teachers. One is called a growth dialogue, and the other one is called a growth plan. I think this was a really positive step. Instead of going to the teacher and saying you're going on a corrective action plan. We've instituted a growth dialogue, which is just a dialogue between the administrator and the professional to maybe there's a couple things that they've observed and they need to be tweaked. So you just have a conversation, you document that in the dialogue, you give it a timeline, and then you come back and revisit it versus developing this grand plan that goes on and on and on. And as Donna and I were discussing, gives you more work to do. So ultimately, I think that's something very positive. I'd like to speak to a couple of the challenges that we've already kind of spoken about, but from my perspective, we all know that special ed teachers are in so many different teaching and learning environments at this point, whether it's a resource room or a self-contained classroom or a co-teaching environment. I kind of see this as an opportunity to kind of deflate the nemesis of your kids versus my kids in the co-teaching situation. I mean, we've been fighting this for years, and we're going to continue to fight the good fight for many years to come because it's not going to go away tomorrow. But I see the accountability system for both teachers. It's like, why can't we just be accountable for all the kids in our room? I'm not sure that we need to slice and dice it and say, okay, you are just for the special ed students and you're for general ed. Then we continue to perpetuate that, you know, your kids versus my kids. So I see that as an opportunity. School-based administrators need training on what to look for in each of these different teaching settings. We've done a couple different things in our school division. We've created a rubric for our autism classrooms that's obviously very intense, and but we've trained our administrators, and our central office folks support the administrators in the evaluation of those teachers. And we actually go in and we evaluate them, and then we share that information with the principals. So I think that's helped, and we've also done an inclusive practices checklist and observation, and we've done inter-rater reliability with the principals. So we go in together and determine, you know, what does a 2 look like in this category, what does a 1 look like, what does a 0 look like. But we probably need to do that for other classrooms as well, especially for our more severe and profound students that are in a self-contained setting. Another issue with the teacher evaluation, and I don't think this has been mentioned at all in the position statement or anywhere else that I've heard of, is from a central office perspective, is how do we address specialists? How do we address coordinators? This is a real challenge for us because they're on the teacher pay scale, but my autism specialists, my speech and language folks, I mean, you guys name it, psychologists, social workers, you know, all the different entities that support our students. One thing that we've done is we've created look-for documents, and the professionals have done that. So my staff, whether you're an audiologist or an autism support staff, looking at your state and national standards, at the CEC standards, what are the look-fors when I go to evaluate you personally or a principal goes to evaluate you? What are the look-fors? What should we see when you're actually doing your job? So I think that's going to help, but we've still got a long way to go there. And then the development of quality IEPs is another area that needs to be understood by administrators. We're getting there, but we're not quite there yet. Processes need to be in place in order to monitor IEP development at the school level. And I think standards-based IEPs are going to get us there because we're connecting the standards with the general curriculum, so that's going to help. But we're still a long way from making sure that the administrators are really looking at IEPs. And if you do include that in your growth plan or your actual documentation, because our folks are actually creating a portfolio of information, and it's really up to the teacher. We have not said to our teachers, you have to have this in your portfolio that you're actually going to submit. So they have a lot of flexibility to put in there what they want. But if an administrator is going to be looking at an IEP, they have to know what a quality IEP looks like. So putting those systems in place. And then just to kind of tie it all together with the CEC position statement, I see a lot of connections between the position statement and our evaluation system. Assessment system, excuse me, we don't call it evaluation. 2 examples are continuous feedback and then the use of multiple data sources. Also the connection between teacher growth and the professional learning responsibilities of the teacher. And I believe that it really clearly articulates the nuances of special education teachers and the need for local school divisions to take a deeper look at how this position can be addressed in local teacher evaluation systems in a systematic manner.
I just want to start out with giving you a little bit more about what I do and my background. I'm a career changer. For the first 20 years of my career, I was a professional actor in New York in film, television, and theater. So I've taken that, and it informs my instruction in the special education classroom today. I have my master's in bilingual special ed from GW. I am also certified in special education, ESL, and of course theater. And I'm nationally board certified, which for special educators is exceptional needs specialists, early childhood through young adulthood. Think about the span that includes, not just to mention the standards, but whoa. As was mentioned, I'm president of the DC CEC unit, and I'm on the board of directors for the CEC. I'm on the advisory board of Learning Through Interdisciplinary Frameworks for Teachers at GW. It's a grant through the U.S. Department of Education. And I'm also an adjunct in the bilingual special ed program at GW. this is what my current classroom looks like. And I have to say that I started out last year. I've been working in Arlington Public Schools for 11 years as a special educator. And for the last 3 years, I was in a multi-intervention program for students with autism. I decided to switch over to the resource side this year in my school because I was on the leadership team and I felt as though I could bring more to my school in teaching the staff about inclusion, about how to work as a team, how to co-teach. Well, when I got my caseload, things changed. It became very quickly a self-contained classroom, and you know, every year I have to learn a few different things. It depends on what my caseload is, and I've been very fortunate this year to get great support from my special education director of special education, who happens to be here, but I've gotten remarkable support from her. I want to say what I was hearing around and what I initially felt when I heard that we would be evaluated, special educators would be evaluated on student performance. The first reaction was this. Teachers were saying, no, you can't do that. And you know, they thought that they'd be having their classrooms totally turned upside down, misunderstood, that my students aren't going to pass the SOLs, you know, what am I going to do? Well, I love this quote, which is, there's a principle which is a bar against all information, which is proof against all arguments, and which cannot fail to keep a man in everlasting ignorance. That principle is contempt prior to investigation. I love that. And that's really what I felt so many special educators, teachers in general, you know, all teachers were feeling about the teacher evaluation process. Contempt prior to really knowing what it was going to look like. Now I have to say, you know, in some states it is very suspect, but you know, in fact, I was lucky enough to be wheeled out with the CEC once before last February to go, and I was so fortunate to go to the White House for a roundtable discussion. And what I brought up at that point is when I walk to the threshold of my classroom every day, the sorts of skills that I have to meet those student needs are so far-reaching. I have to understand, like this year, as you saw, I have K through 3rd grade. I have to know the curriculums in all areas of curriculum for those 4 grade levels. I have students who have a variety of disabilities. I have to understand each one of those disabilities. I work with 8 different teachers. Now my caseload and my situation is not very different from other teachers, special ed teachers around the country. But you know, I get a student who's nonverbal. I have to learn how to use this. What assistive technology is going to work for this student? I had to go and learn sign language, a functional sign language to use within the classroom. A lot of these trainings that I did to work with students with autism, or now working with students who are oppositionally defiant, have oppositional defiant disorder, you know, all of these things, I have to go seeking those trainings. And not just trainings like, oh, you know, let's see if someone can give me some information. I mean, I seek the best training I can possibly get. And I've seen through Arlington that we're even getting better and better professional development at a higher standard than I had seen in the past. This is another quote that I really, really love, and this is what I keep up in my classroom. I keep next to my desk so that I'm thinking about this all the time, and it's by Marie Clay. Teachers must find out what children already know and take them from where they are to somewhere else. All children are ready to learn, but they are starting from different places. It's the teachers who need to know how to create appropriate instruction for where each child is. And I bring this, you know, as a leader in my school, to all teachers. You know, every child who walks through that door wants to be successful. Not one of them wants to come in and be sent to the principal's office and miss instruction. But not all of our students are available for learning, whether it be sensory or whatever the issue happens to be. The things that I really appreciate in the CEC position here, the historical perspective that they gave us, delineating the challenges of the system evaluation process, effectively describing the multifaceted nature of special educators, the challenges evaluators have to better understand special educators' job, and it delineates effective evaluation systems. That's multimodal. So, there's no place like home. I have to say, Arlington Public Schools, I'm so happy to report in looking at their teacher evaluation system really has come to, they have 7 standards. It really follows pretty closely aligned with what the position of CEC is, and I'm very fortunate for that. Because I feel as though my administrator, I can tell you over the years of working with different administrators, some of them know maybe 1/8 of what I really do in a given day, or like through a school year. I had one say, said, do you want this list of what I've done this year in terms of professional development, et cetera? No, I don't need to see that. Well, like that's what I do. I'm proud of all that work I do, and she could care less. That's what it was. She's like, you're good. I don't need to know anything. Well, no, I actually really want you to know because like it's fairly important. And we also have administrators who are, some are stronger in understanding the law or the IEP process than others. Anyway, I feel as though in Arlington I have several modes of being able to bring what I do to my evaluation. So looking at the results of teacher evaluation, if it is tied to high stakes testing, this is what we get: frustrated students. But something resembling the CEC position, I think that we get creative problem solvers. We're not sitting there, just drilling our students. We're not being driven, we can be more creative educators. We can approach the curriculum in a multitude of ways. And also what you get is, tied to high stakes testing, you get ineffective teachers, and you get, resembling the CEC position, you get creative problem solvers again in the teachers. Ultimately, with the CEC position, what I feel, and I'm not here like doing a little sales pitch, like truly, like this is what I believe, is that it elevates the professionalism of our country's special educators, and I think that's really critical today. So thanks.
Let's turn to some questions, comments, thoughts. Stacy.
I'm struck by when I read your policy position in Red Ashes, and we have one too, the similarities and the commonalities across these positions to me speak to how evident this process should be, because the same kinds of things keep coming up in each one of them, and yet I'm struck by how many policymakers either are uninformed about this or don't really care, or are just determined to create policies that don't really reflect these types of things. And I'm curious what you think. You've got gobs of experience at this game. What are some of the things that you think could really change the course of this in terms of really trying to get states and locals and the feds to start really being much more responsible in the design of the policies around teacher evaluation?
Yeah, it's a good question, Stacy, and an important one. I'm not sure I have all the answers collectively. I think maybe we do here in the room, but certainly communication is the key. So getting this information, getting the words of our teachers and our administrators in the field, your school psychologists up to policymakers, whether they be at the on the Hill as members of Congress or the administration and the Department of Education. And so I know that in January we'll be taking our position, as many of you have with your own positions, onto the Hill, working particularly with new members of Congress, helping them to understand it, but not neglecting those seasoned members of Congress. We'll be meeting with the Department of Ed in January as well to talk about how we might move this agenda forward with OSEP and the Secretary's office. So I think collectively we need to be proactive. We didn't talk about the advocacy side of this message today. We wanted to speak mostly about content, but that will be our next step in really moving this forward so that people begin to understand what are the complexities, behind special education evaluation for teachers. So collectively, I think that maybe we need to think about this with some of our coalitions, Stacy. Maybe you have some ideas about this where, we might go up together. And that's why we hoped, to bring you all together so that we can begin that dialogue. Maybe we take the ASHA statement and the NAS statement and the school principal's statement and our statement, and we go up together and, with a united voice. That united voice is always better, that we're together on this. Other ideas maybe on this one? Yes.
September
Yeah.
We had some really scary conversations.
You know, just a comment on that, and we'll move on to the next comment. You know, oftentimes principals come up in this discussion as kind of the bad guys, and that's very unfortunate, and I hope we're not portraying that in our position. They have a lot on their plate, as do all educators, and to think about the job of a principal or assistant principal in a building who needs to know all of the curriculum, all of the different professional roles of the art teacher, the music teacher, the science teacher, the speech pathologist, the special ed teacher. It's a huge responsibility. I mean, to understand that and then manage a building operationally, keep it going. You know, the principal has a very, very key role, and we know from the research and the literature that the principal sets the climate in the building. And so I feel from our perspective, from CEC's perspective, it's our job to help support principals, to help them understand what the roles are of special education teachers so that they can do their job in a way that's more effective. So how do we collaborate in that manner to give principals the information that they need to conduct better evaluations for special ed teachers? So I think if we look at it from that perspective, how do we support each other in this, you know, important work that we're doing? Myrna, I saw your hand, yeah.
Myrna Matlowitz with the School Social Work Association and the Learning Disabilities Association, a bunch of other associations. Just to follow up on Stacy and Amanda's comments, and Deb, you were talking about going to the Hill. I see this actually as something that's come out of the administration that we really need to address as well. When you look at the school turnaround models, you look at the focus of various grants that have come out of the department, they really are focused on cleaning house, on test scores. So I think that that is reflected in, you know, everything that comes out of the department, and until we really get in there and have some serious discussions about this, we're really not going to get very far on the Hill either, because, you know, there are people on the Hill, at least on the Democratic side, who listen very closely, whether they agree or not, with what the department says. So I think it's a more systemic and deeper issue about the whole idea of what education reform really is. So, and this is just one component of it. So I see that as a dialogue also that needs to take place.
Yeah, good. Nancy.
I'm Nancy Reeder with the State Directors of Special Education. I really want to agree with all the comments that have been made, because I think they're all critically important. I think one of my concerns is that what I see happening, and I think one of the speakers mentioned, I'm sorry, I don't remember which one who said it, about the policy getting shape before we had the research to back up what was being proposed. And we saw how well that worked with No Child Left Behind, and I really, we're very good at this country and not remembering history really well. I come from Michigan, so I'm a little sensitive on what happened in Michigan. Obviously, there's no sense of history.
We're filming, Nancy.
Anything that we can do to, because I support everything that all these comments have been made, if there's anything that we can do in the research round to back up where we're coming from, I think it would be helpful. And if anybody's got any ideas about that, or knows of any research that's being done, it would be great and a big help as you go forward and promote your position, which I think is great.
Yeah, thank you, Nancy. Good comment. Sasha?
Yeah, hi, I'm Sasha Godelski. I'm with the American Association of School Administrators, and I know that the comment that the first thing that you said about having one system, I think, is a critically important point that I think our members, our superintendents, are very much struggling with. They want to do that, but one thought that I had was, you know, when you talk about the struggles, especially when you were talking to Jane about, you know, a teacher in a team environment versus in a self-contained classroom, you know, how, I think it would be very helpful for administrators and others different environment, unlike the third grade teacher, or the high school math teacher. So it's it would be helpful to hear how you think that this evaluation, I guess, should differ or vary based on the kind of special education teacher you are and the roles that you have, because I don't think there's a lot of clarity right now around that. So it's going to be, I know it's going to be just everyone guessing.
Mm-hmm. So good. I'm taking some notes, and you know.
I think that goes back to what I commented about on the look-fors. You have to know what each environment entails. What does Donna's environment look like versus a co-teaching? And so that's our first starting point. And we actually are starting that at the central office level through my department. So now we have to take that actually back down to the teacher evaluation system to say, here would be the look-fors in a resource room, here are the look-fors in a self-contained setting. And then when you look at the self-contained setting, you've got multiple factors in that particular setting too. Because if you have a class with severe and profound students with multiple disabilities, that's very different than what Donna has. And so what does that look like? What are the administrators looking for? I agree, we cannot go to multiple systems. We have to have one system, but we need supporting documents to help the principals understand what they're looking for. And then I think that's where we're going to head from my perspective.
Do you know if there are collaborations happening around creating these supporting documents at the state level? I'm just thinking of small rural school districts that they may have one special education administrator whose job it is to identify all of these things.
Nancy, do you have a sense of that?
I don't.
What might be happening from a state level?
I don't even know if anybody's thought of that, to be honest with you. I don't think that people have gone to that level.
I was just saying, you know, are people learning from each other, I guess, in some kind of systematic way about, you know, is Alexandria, for example, sharing what they're doing with Arlington? This is our system, this is the first, and is there a collaboration happening that's organized either at the state level or that is happening at a more local level?
I don't think we've gotten to that point yet because we're all new to the system. I mean, we just started in September. They were just developed, so we're not there yet. But I think we should be headed in that direction.
One of the things that, go ahead, Nancy.
My sense is that it's a top-down system coming from the states, and maybe there are some people from the local level who are involved with the development, but my sense from what I'm hearing is that it's just being pushed out at the state level with or without special ed input at the state level.
One of the things that we did this fall is we participated with our Council of Administrators of Special Ed. They are the local directors and supervisors of special ed in every local school district. Jane is an example of one of those individuals. They have an annual meeting. We spent a morning talking about teacher evaluation, and so we had a lot of good sharing and opportunities to look at what's happening across the nation, sharing good practice, and in some cases sharing practice that's perhaps not so good. I think we need to do that in a more systematic way for the future.
Briefly about this, and maybe we can get some information also from Donna on this one too. But one thing that I didn't point out in the policy that we do talk about that goes to what you're saying is it may be possible for in some of these places, or it may be necessary to have teams of evaluators who are not at a school. A rural school is a perfect example. Do you need a consortia? So it's somebody from outside the school. We explored that a little bit in the policy, and I know these are two urban districts, relatively urban districts that we have represented here. But that's definitely something, and I don't know, Donna, if you wanted to add.
One thing I was going to say, I know in Arlington, and I believe in Alexandria as well, our district sent people to work with the State Department of Education. And so they had certain standards that they wanted the evaluation system to go by, but also Arlington, people from our professional development in various parts of Arlington public schools worked to get these 7 standards to work with. And you know, some people, I think in the past they had worked on the Danielson model, and I think this sort of expands the Danielson model so that we are looking at professionalism. We're looking at, you know, I mean, I have them right in front of me here. So it's instructional planning, professional knowledge, program, and they divide it out by teacher and educational specialist as well, and what the exact examples of artifacts. So we're putting together more of a portfolio, in fact, and that it's, you know, we're thinking more about action research, which kind of gets thrown out the door a little bit, you know, when we come up with our own SMART goals. So I think, and that becomes more research in a way, not just you know, we're looking through through data what's happening with our students. But the fact that Arlington is working with the state and with various districts where there is a little bit of leeway for negotiating, you know, I mean, I'm not directly involved with that. I've just seen the process from afar. But.
Jane, I saw your hand up.
Oh, yeah. Thank you. First of all, kudos to CEC. I mean, your leadership on this is really, really impressive and something, you know, much needed, I think, and really, really impressive. You know, what strikes me is not only the similarities between some of the other related services professions, but professional education too. I mean, you know, there is quite a bit of research out there challenging the use of value-added in evaluating teachers at all. And, you know, one researcher, Henry Braun, was at ETS for years, was down in Boston, said that, you know, you simply, unless you have random assignment of students in the state or really in the nation, there is no way to control for the variance in student characteristics.
Yeah.
And that's a pretty bold sort of assertion to make, and I know that that's, you know, not unchallenged, but I think that really with this very thoughtful document that's so positive too, you know, really positions CEC to kind of lead this dialogue among all of the education community. You know, one of the things that seems to be unfolding is lawsuits. You know, I mean, of teachers being evaluated with significant use of value added, and we've all read the stories. I think I emailed you one recently, Lizzie, of, you know, like the teacher of the year being evaluated as ineffective and losing their jobs. And I know in some states, the way they are evaluating special ed teachers, not nearly as thoughtful as Arlington and Alexandria certainly, is to sort of take the average value-added score for the school and assign that to the special ed teacher, or to take the other teachers on the same grade level and get their average. And I think there will be more legal challenges to this sort of thing. I mean, it really raises so many questions on the face of it. So there's just so much going on in this field, and I do think it's really driven by the administration that has really made this a very obvious and, you know, stated sort of priority. I guess the other thing, and I know we've had some conversations about this, is that it appears to be really growing and expanding in its use with the mandates under the waivers and Grace and Tom. And now in terms of preparation, we're seeing the value-added move to teacher preparation, whereby the graduates of a program will be linked to the value-added scores of the students, and then the preparation program will be graded based on those value-added scores, which is yet, I mean, the first thing I learned in my statistics class was you don't use an assessment for something other than the purpose it was designed for. So it seems that on the face, is that right, Maggie? Are they still teaching that?
Remember, they're still teaching it.
She
got her doctorate with us.
You have to
Yeah.
first say, okay, what was the purpose of these assessments? And I don't believe the purpose was to evaluate teachers. The purpose was to measure student growth. So there, you know, there's a research question there, and that whole validity and reliability question. So I'm not sure what my question is. I just, you know, really wanted to thank you for a job so well done and for your leadership. And that I think this dialogue is so important, and you're right, our policymakers seem to be, you know, sort of on a determined path, and I think the more they hear from their constituents and from, you know, teachers and administrators like you have here about the impact, and the more teachers start getting these high stakes decisions made based on things that are really questionable in terms of validity and reliability,
Yeah, thank you, Jane. Yes.
I'm Leanna Height with Education Week, and I kind of wanted to follow up on this issue of value-added and student achievement data. I wanted to ask Jane, you know, you said you're attributing 20% of the special ed teachers' evaluation to student achievement data, and I'm wondering what you're actually using for that right now, and when it moves to the 40%, as you think it will do, what will you use then? And then to follow up on that, I wanted to ask, you know, the paper doesn't really go into it, but what is CEC's position on what percentage of a special ed teacher's evaluation should be linked to student achievement, and B, if value added isn't ready, which is what I think the paper is saying, what should we use instead?
Okay, I'm getting a high sign over from our filmers that we need to repeat the question, so I'll try to do that from the microphone. That was a very passionate and involved question. So the question was to Donna to talk about, to Jane, I'm sorry.
About the 20%.
The 20% and moving it to the 40%.
To the 40, right.
Perhaps.
And what measures are you using?
So the teachers actually decide on the measures. So it could be SOLs, it could be SRI, it could be PALs, depending on the grade level. The SRI is the Scholastic Reading Inventory, which measures student growth, and we do that 3 times yearly. So it measures student growth on the reading Lexile scores for students with disabilities. And actually, we do it on all students. So the teachers are determining what we're going to evaluate the academic growth on. The school division is not saying you will use these 3 items or evaluation tools. So it could be artifacts, you know, it could be student work, but it has to be multiple measures. So we've just given them basically a list of what the options are. Obviously, standardized test scores are going to be part of that 20%, but it's just part of it. It's not like the whole 20%. And we're moving to 40% because we have to.
And when you say that standardized test scores are going to be part of that, how do you link the students and the teachers if there's like a co-teaching? You said co-teaching, I guess they would take all of the students.
Yeah, I don't even know if that's been determined. That's really kind of my position on that. I think we should own all students when we're in a co-teaching environment versus saying, so you could go down to the time you're in there, you know. I mean, do we really want to get down to that? You know, oh, I'm only in here for 20 minutes because this student only gets 20 minutes of service. So why should I be accountable for all of these students? And I'm saying personally that I feel like we need to be accountable for the students in that particular learning and teaching environment. So that we kind of get rid of this whole your students, my students thing.
Donna, did you want to comment?
And then what is CEC's?
Yeah. Okay. I just want to comment on something Jane said. I think it's important, and how do we hope that this tool will be used for the future? We understand that perhaps in Virginia they're going to have to move to 40%. Seems like the best thinkers in Alexandria thought that this was not necessarily a good idea, and they came up with 20%. You'll see some of that conversation across the nation. Montgomery County, Maryland superintendent spoke out in the newspaper very strongly the other day about let's push back on some of the standardized testing, using standardized testing for teacher evaluation, et cetera. So this feedback is coming. CEC, and so what I hope will happen is that people like Jane, like Donna, will take this document to their administration, to the State Department of Education, and use it as information and an advocacy tool to say why they believe 40% may not be the most appropriate percentage in this area. And that's what we hope to do also. I just want to recognize Lori Calvert, who's here from the U.S. Department of Education. Lori is, I don't know exactly your new title, but I'm going to call you teacher in residence, expert teacher. And Lori has participated in a variety of CEC activities over the last couple of years to really gain the perspective of special education teachers. So we're really pleased about that. We've engaged in a lot of discussion with Lori, and she's presented to our members in a variety. We did an Ask Arnie with Lori, and we had a forum at our convention that was led by teachers at the Department of Ed. So Lori's taking copious notes, and I know she's going to go back to the department and share these, good and bad. But Lori, do you want to say a few?
I feel a little bit like a piece of meat surrounded by sharks. Not that I'm feeling defensive.
You are welcome here.
You know, it's interesting because when I watched the presentation and what Lindsay said, I think the people at the department agree with like 95% of that. And I think the part they don't agree with, and as a teacher I understand, I think both sides of this a little bit, is the waiting for the data to be perfect on the value added before we start using it at all. What I wanted to say is where I see the value added or whatever test score data is used. I mean, for instance, we're big on multiple measures and we don't need 2 tests or 3 tests, right? And we're big on parent evaluation and student evaluation and all kinds of things. But the reason it's working in Alexandria and Arlington, and the reason it works in a lot of places, is when teachers actually get in and lobby their local, district, state folks to get the evaluation system right. The department does put in language and things like Race to the Top, like teacher evaluation, student data must be a significant portion, but it doesn't say what that portion is. And so there are states where it's 15% and there are states where it's 50%, and they're both getting grants, right? And some states have taken the position, well, let us put it in as a portion, and as the tests get more reliable and better, we will amp it up to a certain level. One example I wanted to give you, though, about this was in Tennessee, and we've talked about this guy a lot, this Drew Davison that we met. He is a music teacher in Tennessee, and he was really frustrated because his school, the way they were using data to evaluate him was every art or music teacher was told, pick either you want reading scores associated with you or the math scores associated with you. And he was really frustrated by this. So what did he do? He's in Memphis. He organized a committee. He got in that district 1 teacher of each of the arts areas. So there was a dance teacher, a practical arts, a music teacher, all that. And they developed a survey and surveyed all the art teachers in the area about what would be a good way to collect data on our learning. And then they piloted in Memphis, and they used a blind evaluated portfolio system that gets sent away to people who don't know them and gets evaluated. They piloted a system that now is going to be used in the whole state. And so it was because the teachers said, okay, they said you have to use student data, but they didn't say what data, and what you're proposing doesn't make any sense. And the other thing I just wanted to say is that a lot of these programs, Race to the Top, the waivers, all the stuff, have a portion in it that require the people who are applying for the grant to prove that they're talking to stakeholders. So when they're going through that, you ought to walk up to those people with your business card and say, I want on the committee. I want on the group. I want to be part of this discussion of this evaluation. So anyway, I could go on forever.
Yeah. Well, Lori, thank you for being here, and you're in the special ed home here. You're not. This is not a Shark Tank, even though you may feel that way. But we appreciate your work and really helping to gain the perspective of teachers, and that's been important. And so we appreciate that. I saw a hand from Mark.
Thanks.
We're running out of time, so we're gonna kind of try to wrap this up. But Mark.
That teachers get to choose the measures that make sense for them in their classroom with their students, to the degree they have that kind of autonomy, either individually or as a small group, then it works. And to the extent to which the measures are chosen for them, it's going to be problematic. I wasn't aware that there was an element of autonomy in which measures are chosen.
Well, we're still working with our administrator. I mean, that has to be signed off by our administrator with us. It's not like we just say, this is what I'm doing, and that's fine. I mean, our administrator sits with us and says, okay, show me your data. What are you thinking? And then we have a discussion about it. So you have a meeting at the beginning of the school year, you have a meeting again in May to say, where have you gone?
Personally, at the administrator,
Arlington.
you and your colleagues?
We have individual conferences
Okay.
with our administrator.
So each teacher may have some autonomy in this regard, or the ability to negotiate which measures are being used?
In my school, with our administrator,
Yeah.
working with the administrator. We present to the administrator, we discuss it, and come up with it. So I don't know how autonomous that is.
Yeah.
But
But it's based on our
It has to
work.
be agreed upon.
Yeah, it's agreed
Between
upon.
the two parties.
I think,
And anything that I'm saying is my perspectives. Other people within Arlington may see things differently than I do, and I'm sure they do. I mean,
some of the curriculum-based measures may be different for different students,
Yeah.
depending on their disability, depending on whether they're teaching math or science or reading. And so there's part of the negotiation, that they're able to, like for kids with autism, there may be a particular, curriculum that they're using that has a curriculum-based progress monitoring measure that's associated with it. So there's kind of some of the give and take in determining what's the most appropriate measures for the students who are in my classroom at this present time. And that may change over time.
Also,
Yeah.
just quickly, Jane really spoke to this about there being a list of 20 measures. So these aren't measures that are being chosen, at least in the districts that we're talking about here. I guess I'm concerned about the implication of your question being that they're not standardized, they're not objective, they'll be easily manipulated. And so that concerns me. But I think Jane, the first three measures she talked about were PALS, DIBBLs, maybe not DIBBLs, but SRI. I'm sorry. So those are standardized measures that play into kind of what Maggie's point was about the research the field does have about what they do know and how they do it correctly. I just wanted to make sure that wasn't. I just know
I
you,
just
Mark.
saw that in my question.
One more, Susan, and then we're going to wrap it up.
I just wanted to make a couple of comments to say that we're really happy that a number of things that we stated in our document, the case, it was reaffirmed by what NASP has done.
Susan's from ASHA, by the way. Yeah.
Susan
Mm-hmm.
Starr from ASHA. In what NASP has done, what you have all done, and that you're taking leadership on this, just wanted to reaffirm, some of the comments that you all said, because when we went through our process, we've just seen how desperate some of our members are to have the latest research on this, and the advocacy work that we're doing on this to help them become involved in their states or local districts. And folks had said it's so important for the specialized instructional support personnel folks and the special ed teachers to be involved in the process, because so many times they're left out of the process. They feel left out of the process. And then the process that's put in place is not appropriate for them. One comment I wanted to make, I don't know if you all experienced it with your membership, is that we had some members, though, who felt that we did not go far enough in our document. We
Yeah.
outlined a number of these general principles similar to what you all did. They really wanted more data. They wanted something that tied themselves directly, that they could say tied to a test score, because that's the pressure that they're getting. So, the more information we can get out about why this is appropriate, or more research that we can try to reinforce, the need to have more research, it would be really helpful. And the one other comment I want to make is the emphasis on using this for professional development and using it in a positive manner, because Kim and I also co-chair the Coalition on Personnel Shortages, and we know there still are shortages across the country in many of our professions, and this is used negatively. The message out there also is very bad for recruitment and retention of qualified professionals, and we all know that's an issue anyway. So I think working together would really be
Our members
very powerful.
said the same thing. They wanted more. Our board initially wanted us to go a little bit further on this, wanted more. So this is a work in progress, as we all know, for all of us, and as we move forward in 2013, we have a great opportunity in front of us, and I hope we'll seize that together to move forward this agenda, to get it right, as Maggie said, because it's so critically important for our teachers in the field, for the children that we teach every day, and for the families in the communities. And so thank you for being here today with us. Thank you for the work that you do every day, your leadership, your advocacy for all of these issues.